I'm going to try to give a brief summary of what inheritance is all about. So inheritance is the idea in Java that you have a class. In this case, I have a class called worker, and then I have other classes that I write that I think, well, like an hourly worker. It's still a worker. I still want all the characteristics of worker, but I want to add a little bit of function to it. And it saves me, the idea of inheritance is instead of rewriting a class from scratch, I can just make a new class that inherits all the characteristics of my original class, plus I might want to add a couple of things. So let's go through this. So this is a worker, and a worker, to make it real simple, I said a worker has two instance fields, name and rate. This is the pay rate. This is the constructor. And just a little review, you do not want to redeclare these variables. Like I would not want to say string name or double rate. I don't redeclare them in the constructor. If I did, they would become local variables. You do not want to do that. So here's a couple of simple methods. Get rate returns the rate of pay. Get name returns the name. Compute pay, I pass in, my input is hours, and I'm calculating the pay, which is pay rate times hours. And then I have a toString method. Sometimes students get confused with the toString method must return a string, of course. I can use this variable name, but I could also run the method getName if I wanted to. I mean, it's really your choice. I could say getName, and I could say, instead of saying rate, I could run the method getRate. I mean, that would also work, right? But I'm just going to say name. Either one is the same thing. Okay, so this is a very simple method called worker. And then let's say I decide, wait a minute, I want to have an hourly worker that has all the same instance variables and methods, except I want to do one thing slightly differently. I want to calculate their pay a little bit differently. So here I have created an hourly worker, and you can see here it is in the diagram. The hourly worker, I'm saying, is a class hourly worker extends worker. Well, extends is a special keyword which means that hourly worker is a subclass. The official vocabulary is it's a subclass of worker, meaning it has all the methods of worker, plus I'm adding or changing some of the methods, I should say. So worker is my superclass, hourly worker is my subclass. And you can look at the diagram here on the left, how it shows it nicely when you do this in BlueJ, which is one of the reasons I like to use BlueJ. So the first thing I have an hourly worker, which looks a little bit funny, is my constructor. Instead of, it still takes name and rate, but instead of saying name equals n, rate equals r, I can't access those variables directly, right? These variables are private variables in worker, so I have to use this special keyword super and pass it n and r. Super means run the superclass constructor. So this will run the constructor in this superclass and set name and rate. So an hourly worker has a name and a rate, you just can't access them directly. I have to run the superclass to set them. An hourly worker, even though I did not rewrite the methods getRate and getName, it has those methods. And actually toString, you imagine that those methods are still there. I can still run those methods. They're actually part of an hourly worker. Real quick, another method here that I did want to change is the compute pay. So I'm saying, just for the sake of it, that an hourly worker gets paid in very much the same way that a worker gets paid, except if they work over 40 hours, I'm saying that they get paid overtime, which is time and a half. So if hours is greater than 40, I'm running the getRate method. Now, getRate, of course, is the method in the superclass. So I'm taking the rate, multiplying it by 40. That's for the first 40 hours, and then I'm adding to that the rate of pay times 1.5 times hours minus 40. So these are for all hours over 40, they're getting 1.5 their pay rate. They're getting time and a half. So that's only if they work greater than 40 hours. Otherwise, I'm just going to return the compute pay result from the superclass. So again, here I'm using the super keyword. I'm saying run compute pay in the superclass which will run this compute pay and pass it hours. Now this is only going to happen if hours is not greater than 40. By the way, if I did not say super.compute pay, it would run this compute pay method and I would be in an infinite loop. So I do have to say super.compute pay. And there you go. So let's take a quick look at salaried worker. A salaried worker is, again, it is a worker, and I'm saying extends worker. And this time I've decided arbitrarily that a salaried worker gets sick days. And so with this constructor, I'm actually calling the superclass, and a call to the superclass must be the first line of the constructor. I'm calling the superclass, passing it name and rate, and I'm also initializing the sick days. I'm saying I guess every salaried worker starts with 10 sick days. This guy has its own compute pay method as well. A salaried worker, I'm saying if their hours is greater than 50, I've decided they get an additional sick day. All right. Otherwise, I'm calculating their pay using the superclass compute pay, and I'm passing it 40 because I'm saying a salaried worker gets paid for a 40-hour week no matter what, even if they work overtime or if they miss a couple hours. So their compute pay works slightly differently. And I wrote a new method, take sick day, which subtracts 1 from the number of sick days. And then I wrote another method which overrides. And so when you rewrite a method that's in the superclass, it's called overriding. So I'm overriding the toString method. The first thing I'm doing is calling the super toString method, which of course, as you know, is going to give me the name and pay rate. So that's what this call to super is going to do. And then I'm adding on to that the sick days remaining. So this is an idea of having a superclass and having two subclasses. Of course, you could have many layers of this. I could have a subclass of salaried worker and a subclass of that. And actually in Java, there is one superclass, the tippy top of all the superclasses, which is the superclass object. Everything really inherits from object. These are all objects. And let's just take a super quick look at the tester. This is the tester. So here I've created a new worker, Warren, and when I print Warren W1 there, when I print W1, it runs the toString method in worker. When I do compute pay, it runs the compute pay method in worker, obviously. Here I've made another worker, H1, which is a new hourly worker. And by the way, you're allowed to use the superclass's name here. I can say worker H1 equals new hourly worker. I could actually say hourly worker is a new hourly worker. That's okay as well. So anyway, I made a new hourly worker, Howie, and when I do this print statement, it runs the toString method in the hourly worker because H1 is an hourly worker. And when I run compute pay, it runs it again in hourly worker. And then finally, I made a salaried worker, and I can run methods, take sick day, I run the toString method, and run compute pay. So again, this was pretty quick, but I hope it kind of makes sense, and I hope you'll refer to this example when you do the first couple of projects with inheritance. All right, get to work.